This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR with your hosts, Felix Mitchell
and Louise Fraser.
Well, today we've got something a little bit different. I think it's going to be a really interesting episode. So we've got a roundtable discussion, and we've got four fantastic authors who have written books for the CIPD HR Essentials Explained book series. Now, this series was written with a real person in mind. It's sort of specifically for CIPD graduates or someone walking off of the back of an HR qualification. They're coming out of the exam room into the new job thinking, all right, I'm ready for this, only to realize that no one actually told them how to deal with the messiness of real life. So this is a sort of practicality that follows the theory sort of book series. So how to have, that conversation with your CEO, how to sit across from someone and tell them they're being made redundant, how to build a business case for well-being when your leadership really just wants you to sort out the profitability of the organization. Now, we're lucky enough to have all four authors of the podcast with us today. So let's start by asking each one of them to introduce themselves and the book that they've written. So Becky, would you lead us off?
Hi, thanks, Felix. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Lee, and I have been a global talent leader for about 27 years now. So lots of experience and practical experience working in large-scale corporates and also startup organizations. The book that I've written is called Talent Acquisition and Attraction Explained. And this really serves the audience of junior HR early in career professionals, but also those that are really seeking to move into talent acquisition. So talent acquisition is a career move that I made many moons ago, and I have not looked back and really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And Kinsey?
Nice to meet you all. My name's Kinsey. My background's in people analytics as well as HR consulting. And I've written this book, People Analytics Explained, which is basically complementary to all the other authors here, hopefully giving early career professionals with a grounded view of what people analytics is. So as you know, people analytics is a relatively emerging field in the area of HR. So I think it's critical for us to get it right in terms of understanding what it actually is. Because right now, a lot of people, particularly early career professionals, have this misconception that they need to learn coding. They need to be able to be great at technical skills in order to be better at people analytics. And this book is there to demystify the preconceived notion.
Amazing. That's so important as well. Looking forward to getting into that later. Prianka?
Hi Felix, I'm Prianka Jaidka. I'm the Head of Colleague Experience at LSL Property Services. We empower smart property decisions. I've worked in the corporate world for over kind of 2 decades, and more recently kind of in the HR world and progressed through from kind of HR admin to Head of Colleague today. The book that I've written is HR Essentials, and it's very much for those generalist HR professionals that are moving into HR and want to understand the full remit of what your day-to-day looks like, giving you kind of handy tips on some of the challenges that you'll face, some of the conversations you'll be having, what kind of stakeholders you'll be working with. So it's basically a book that I wish I had maybe 10 years ago. And it's got all that information in there. And then there's also the coaching questions, which you might find that you're in those scenarios or something similar, and what kind of how you can approach those situations and how you work through it as well.
Wow, how important is that? Thank you. Gemma?
Hello everyone, I'm Gemma Dale. I'm a former HR director turned academic, so I'm now a senior lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University, where I teach on HR programmes. I've written 2 books in the series, Employee Relations Explained, which focuses on all those tricky issues like discipline, grievance and termination, and also Engagement and Wellbeing Explained, which, as the name suggests, focus on how we can support employee health and wellbeing in the workplace and how we can support employee engagement too.
Fantastic. And Shakil, last but not least.
Thank you very much. What a hard act to follow for all these lovely authors. So my name is Shakil Butt. I'm a bit of an oddity. I'm a qualified accountant and a qualified HR professional. Spent 20 years in finance, the last 16 in HR, 8 as a HR director, 8 as a freelancer. I'm also a visiting lecturer at Birmingham University, where I lecture at the master's level for the Strategic Human Resource Management module and the Leadership Development. I was the board champion for inclusion for the CIPD on the board. I've been ADI consultant now for a good while, working with a range of clients and the private, public, and voluntary sector. And my book is called EDI Explained, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Explained. However, I did try to make the case for DEI hard, DEI hard, because I do believe diversity, equity, and inclusion is very hard. And it's not just now. I think we've been in a very bad place for a while, and this pushback we're seeing, and we are seeing a pushback, it's probably well deserved. So my book's not just aimed at early professionals. It's slightly different in that regard to the rest of the books. It's aimed at existing EDI practitioners and HR practitioners to have a rethink and a reset about what EDI, good EDI actually is, and perhaps, say goodbye to some of the bad practices, hopefully.
I think I feel like we could do a podcast on every single one of these topics. And in fact, Lou, we have, haven't we?
Yes, we have. And I love Die Hard. I'm going to take that one away.
I've made up Coach, which is based on the Die Hard film poster, but Kogan Page didn't go for it.
Never mind.
I think it's probably something to do with IP on that one. No, I think this is so cool. So many different perspectives. I wonder if we could start with a bit of a generalist question. Now, let's go fastest finger first on the answer. Where do you think that reading fits in to a successful career, brackets, in HR?
Okay, so I must confess, until I moved into HR, I actually thought I knew everything I needed to know about HR when I was a finance practitioner. And it wasn't until I actually had to go back and study again at the age of 42, I think it was, I realized how little I knew about HR. And since then, I've never stopped learning. And I realized actually the only way to learn is by keep learning and actually keep challenging yourself. And one of the greatest things I ever did was actually join the board of the CIPD, because I was the idiot in the room and I was always learning from everybody else. And that's the key thing. As long as you see yourself as an idiot in the room, you'll always keep learning and you keep yourself grounded. Once you think you know it all and you think you've arrived, you've actually missed the boat.
I love that. Rebecca.
Hi. Yeah. I work in talent at the moment, so actually looking at how we develop talent and people strategies across organisations for effectiveness, and I think it goes back to our employees and also in HR. It's really important that we have 3 ingredients for success, and this is all about personal ownership and career mastery, of which is a topic that I'm deeply interested in. But I think as you start out your career in HR, it's really important to embrace a curious mindset. And a curious mindset is really reading a lot, finding out about best practice, also learning from others. So it's absolutely essential to have this growth mindset or curious mindset. And the other area is around resilience. So we know that it's a very turbulent world right now. So in order to allow our organizations to be resilient and adaptive, then as HR professionals, we really need to plan for any turbulence. So again, learning, reading what's in the news, how does that impact an organization? And in my book, we talk a lot about societal changes and the impact to talent strategies. And then the last bit is really about engaging and, embracing, collaboration. So we know that with COVID, that was a skill, I guess it was a skill deficit because everyone was working in this virtual world. So now we're back in person. The opportunity to engage on learning, but also with people is really important. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, but those are the 3 pillars to leadership development, and it's something that I live by in my values every day.
Great. Becky, that's so interesting. So would you say then, I found that really interesting that you mentioned current affairs. Would you say, I guess, geopolitical affairs as well? Would you recommend that HR and people leaders stay on top of their geopolitics?
100%. So there's the first chapter of my book. It sounds so random. A lot of TA leaders probably raise their eyebrows around this idea of the evolution of TA, so the evolution of recruitment. The book takes you back to Roman times, actually. Some of these practices, HR is a fairly new concept, but talent acquisition has been around recruitment since millennia, and we've always had to navigate turbulent environments. So I think looking backwards through history in the lens of how did we recruit against diversity, that has always stood since Confucius, and trying to democratize recruitment in Chinese civil service, for example, is as relevant as it is today. So it's really important that we look at the geopolitical factors, so economic factors. So are we in a candidate market? Are we an employer market? That can change depending on the economic environment, right through to technology shifting and AI. And also the societal changes. So the first chapter of my book talks all about this, and the aim is to really establish that credibility as a HR and also what I call a talent value leader. And I think that the business really sometimes needs to take a step back and reflect on the operating environment it's in, to really think about how do we actually bring the best talent in. And I so there's a lot dedicated in that space, and I'm a bit of a nerd on this, as you can tell.
Very, very cool. Kinsey.
So back to the question around reading, right? Reading's critical, and it reminded me of something I've heard once. I couldn't remember what was the source, but reading a book is actually the best way to teleport from one place to the other. So from teleporting from your own experience to another people's previous experience. And I think that also applies in this series, because here, how privileged we are to have all 5 HR leaders with very varied experience, and Gemma writing too as well. So abundant experience, and how can you teleport yourself as a reader from your own position to all those experiences. So I think that was a quite cool point. And another point was around not only reading nowadays, because nowadays we read in so many different formats as well. We listen as well. Plus, if we consider from a neurodiversity standpoint, because for me, when I'm reading things, I typically struggle to keep my attention on the page a lot of the times, particularly if it's very theory-based books. So a lot of the times it's also about listening, about the auditory experience as well. That's why in my book, this one particular section on technical skills, I also almost imagined that the reader will read it along with ChatGPT. So I provided them the keyword that they need to ChatGPT in order to learn more if they want to delve in more. So that's another kind of lens that I've taken into consideration, and hopefully the reader actually enjoy it.
Very cool. I'm loving the AI native element to that, Kinsey. That's awesome. And Gemma, did you want to jump in on this one as well?
You asked Felix whether it's important to keep up with current trends. I would say one thing that's also important for aspiring and current HR professionals is also to do that future gazing as well, and start to think about what might the future of work looks like? What might that mean for my organization? Now, that's really difficult because all future predictions are difficult. But I think that idea of thinking about what might come next, and that's also where reading comes in, where podcasts, where listening really comes in for those professionals. So I think we need to do both. We need to think about the now and what's happening now, and we need to think about what might happen in the future.
I couldn't agree more. And it's an interesting one, Gemma. I'd just like to ask you, because it feels like the future in many ways is less clear than it has been, certainly in my lifetime. So many radically different perspectives on what impact AI is going to have, what's going to happen with our relationships with America or China, or I mean, you name it. There's so much unpredictability at the moment. So is there value? Because I think one of the things that I speak to a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues about is, well, what's the point of future gazing if all of these experts future gaze and that's what they spend all of their life doing, all these academics that you work alongside, and if you got three people with different perspectives, the only thing you know for sure is that at least two of them are wrong, probably all three of them. So where's the benefit in future gazing if you might well be wrong?
Well, look, predictions are obviously difficult, and especially when we're talking about, volatile and changeable environments. And AI is a great example of that. If we'd been sitting here having a future-gazing conversation in 2020, would we have seen the rise of ChatGPT, for example, and just what that's meant? So I think we can think about these things. We can model future scenarios. We can think about how we might respond. But ultimately, this is where that ability to pivot comes in. And that's a soft skill, because we can never predict exactly what's coming. The pandemic was another great example of that, where HR professionals had to adapt on the go, be resilient, come up with new ways of working, new policies, new approaches in almost the very moment. So there is some value in thinking it through, but at the same time, we also have to remember that some things will just come that we are not expecting. And again, I think that comes down to having that remit of soft skills that will enable you to deal with whatever the future brings, and indeed whatever technologies might come next.
And I guess it's that sort of having an end destination allows you to at least have a trajectory of change and a hypothesis that you're testing, as opposed to just reacting the whole time. I always find it's easier to tweak your direction than it is to set up a new one each time.
And I think our organisations need that from us. I think as HR professionals, we're really uniquely well placed to go out and look at what other companies are doing, look at what those potential predictions might be, and bring that thinking back in-house, and act as that guide to our organisational leaders. And that's absolutely, for me, a space that HR professionals can play.
Priyanka.
Thank you, Felix. Just going back to the original question around reading.
Someone's got to bring it back. I'm clearly not doing my job well enough.
No, I just wanted to agree with Becky around being curious. I think that's really important as not just a HR professional, but any professional working in the working world, because you need to learn from others. You need to explore what's available, and that could be through kind of podcasts, but also reading as well. And I think I agree with kind of Gemma as well, where she says about horizon scanning. So you might not be able to predict the future, which is what we've kind of alluded to, but it's important to equip yourself with the tools that you think that you'll need in the future. So I think we spoke about ChatGPT. It's not something that we might have spoken about 5 years ago, but if you're not using it today, you are losing your skills, and it's there to support us. And I'm a big advocate. I mean, I use it at quite a minimum level at the moment. I know I still need to be curious and use it to a greater depth. But you need to have those kind of skills of being curious, and horizon scanning within your role.
Absolutely. And that's where the fun is, right?
Exactly. You don't know what's going to come up next, do we? So
absolutely.
I
Go ahead, Lou.
No, I was going to say I agree, and the HR landscape is consistently changing, isn't it? Whether it be political or environmental or things that we need to do within our organisation. And when we met and discussed prior, to this podcast, we talked a lot about the difference between reading a book and then being a HR professional in practice, and some of the gaps that you were all looking to fill in relation to your book. And I suppose, Priyanka, while you've got the mic, I wondered if there was anything in particular from a tools or resource perspective that you've put into your book to support that transition from theory to real life situations.
I would say there's a couple of chapters, really. There's the employee relations, which obviously that is your day-to-day as a HR professional. But then there's also the ESG chapter, which I think is quite important as you progress and you become more senior, that opens new doors and new conversations that you tend to have. You might be a participant in activities or campaigns that your business is doing, but then as you progress, you then become that change maker, or you might be leading on something. So, for example, at LSL, I'm the chair, sorry, of the Communities Forum. And again, there's so much around that, from a community, a social aspect, being a HR professional as well, wanting to bring that into the mix. So I think it's really important that you, again, going into that horizon scanning, you know what's happening and what's coming up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Shakil, I see you've had your hand up for a little while there, so I'll go over to you.
So thank you for that. So I was going to say, actually, one of the things that Peter Cheese often would quote and cite at conferences is that HR really are the cobbler's children. So that we look at everybody else's learning needs, but we often neglect our own. And that's, I think, very true. And when we're talking about developing ourselves and what the role of a HR practitioner actually is, I'm going to actually signpost to another book who's not one of the authors here today, but I'm sure you probably all know her. So Karen Bevan wrote a book called Strategic Human Resource Management. And what she alluded to was there's 4 things any good HR practitioner needs to do. One is understand their professional and skill set itself. So whether that's around change management, employee relations, whatever that is, be skilled in that area. The second thing is actually understanding your HR community, understand what's going on in the HR professional community, what's changing, what are the developments, what are the HR community writing about, what are they saying, what's being said on podcasts, and then understand the business you're in. So what specific business, if you really want to add value to your organization and not just be, well, HR just do, transactional work, but actually add strategic value, understand your business. And then finally, the added dimension is actually understanding your sector. And coming back to the geopolitical question, what's happening to your sector as a whole, not just your business, but your sector. And when you think of along those 4 different, lenses, as a practitioner, as a HR person, you're adding a lot more value and much more strategically. So that's one element. But I do think we're not great at this, if I'm being very honest. I do think, and I've heard this very often from senior HR leaders, which I'm really sometimes get shocked by. Well, I didn't come into the HR space to work with numbers. I know that. I didn't come into the HR space to work with technology. Yeah, I get that. I want to work with people. But unfortunately, the landscape has changed. And often we talk about, being at the forefront of change management in organizations. But we're quite resistant to change. We want to, some of us want to hold on to models of the past, but they don't really work. HR has evolved. It's moved very fast. It's still moving, and it's moving faster than ever. Josh Bursin said May 2025 this year. And it's a bit dramatic, Felix. I'll give him that. He said because of AI, it's the end of HR as we know it. And now, very dramatic, typically Josh Bursin's statement. But then you've also got the CEO of IBM saying publicly that has replaced hundreds of HR jobs with AI. So change is coming. And unfortunately, I think some of us have got our heads in the sand and not in the books, not horizon scanning. We're not future thinking. And you're very right. It's happening. Things are changing so fast that whatever you presume you think is probably already added. And again, Gemma will know this. Whatever we're teaching on our courses, 6 months down the road is slightly redundant by the time we come around to the next semester.
Yeah, I think I can speak for that firsthand, Shakil. As a recent CIPD student, the modules had changed even in the time period that I was a student over a couple of years, and you can see that they reflect the subjects that are important, but that doesn't mean that they don't change consistently. And I think actually, Shakil, you moved quite nicely into a subject that I know Kinsey is probably quite hot on. What does the AI shift mean for people starting out in HR analytics today?
Well, it's a very big question. If we look at AI, I think there's a lot of AI talk out there, but there's a lot of mixture of information that's get categorized under the AI umbrella. But I think a fundamental principle that people need to perhaps starting to understand is what aspect of AI is it? Is it an AI technique? Is it an AI capability? Or is it an AI application? Right? Because we're talking about ChatGPT is an AI application that is collective of multiple AI capabilities, which then had a number of AI techniques that's underpinning it. So I think before we go out and throw out the word AI out there, it's important for everyone to have a foundational level of understanding towards what AI actually is and what aspect of AI we're actually talking about, right? And I think it's that very confusion, bringing it back to the book, that's causing early career professionals to feel overwhelmed. Because using people analytics as an example, right? You hear all these big terms like data science, like R, like Python, like algorithms, all these big words. You just hear it. And then that makes the early career HR professionals, they are typically not specialized in stats, right? They immediately lose their confidence. They're like, oh, this is not our arena. This is not our playing field. This is not a familiar territory. And that's why they hesitate to get into the field of people analytics. And linking it back to what Shakil said earlier on, the People Analytics Explained book aims to address what those complicated words such as AI actually means and provide a systemic framework in order for people to be able to comprehend these big trending words. And no matter what kind of big words that we are talking about, it goes back to the people skills. It goes back to our ability to manage relationships. It goes back to our ability to build trust and being able to change manage. And that's what we try to spell out. And you probably have heard the term system thinking that's just recently gaining popularity over the last few months. I don't know. I've been talking about it for years, but I don't know why people only started catching up on that recently. It's the same thing as Gen AI. It has been there for a while. It only started catching popularity when it has been democratized via the format of Gen AI tools, right? So learning systems thinking can really help early career professionals really gain an understanding of how to tackle these big words in a complicated world.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Kinsey. And I love the idea of bringing it back to really a basic level understanding at first, and making sure that people are clear on the terminology and what they're talking about. And then some of the other practices are often the same across multiple subjects, right? And you did a really good job of bringing it back to your book there. And I'm going to try and bring it back to the book for everybody else. So, Gemma, if readers only remember one key idea from each of your books, what should it be?
Oh, wow. Now, there's a question I hadn't thought of. I think I'm going to maybe take a cop out here and try, rather than come back to any sort of particular theories or approaches or anything like that, I'm going to come back to something we've already sort of touched on, which is this idea that as a HR professional, this stuff is complex, it's difficult, and it's messy, because people are complex and difficult and messy. And anybody who's spent any time working in HR will know that. So I think for me, it would be about using those books to support your career development. And help you to be the best HR professional that you can be. So whichever one of these books you're reading, mine or any of my co-authors on the series, it's about having that, what we've already said, that curious mindset, and taking these as just an opportunity to learn more about these subjects and to learn more about how you might deal with them in practice, and just, be that awesome HR professional.
Love that. You're right. And no one situation is the same. So if you have some of the grounding with the books that you're reading, then you can consistently come back to that and assess, whether that situation sort of aligned to the specifics of the book. I couldn't agree more. Becky, can you share a favorite story or case study from your book that illustrates your message? Yeah, so there are many. My book has got very, very practical areas, and also it does talk about the attributes and qualities that an early in career HR professional does need, with very, very tangible examples. A very good example, and Kinsey will relate to this because we worked on a very similar project. But I think for any HR professional, whether you're new in career or whether actually you're a seasoned leader, the art of being able to say no So this idea of being a hedgehog, so I actually brought it up in the book that at one point I ran the whole of the graduate recruitment for a Big Four organization, and I had a lot of the team were excellent, but they were servicing the business with ad hoc reports, not insights, not data-driven insights. So getting the team to say no, like a hedgehog. So hedgehogs are kind. Everyone likes a hedgehog. But being curious, so being data curious, and how do you actually challenge some of those leaders or perhaps traditional ways of working? So in my book, it's very practical. So it does actually it does ladder up to strategy because I am strategic. I do explain a lot of the concepts around talent acquisition, where it's come from, how to move into a more sort of optimized maturity model with AI, right through to being reactive, in a reactive approach, which most organizations are still, believe it or not, very reactive in hiring. But I think a key strength that people need is the ability to say no, because that's how you start to demonstrate value and ensure that you're working on the projects that will actually drive change, as opposed to working on initiatives that actually don't really have an impact or are aligned to business outcomes.
I like that. I love the hedgehog analogy. I think also, that whole managing expectations and saying no piece is so relevant across almost every job, right? So
yeah, I did actually have a picture of a hedgehog in there. It was removed. So Co-Compose removed it, but
no
tried to bring it
diehard,
to
no
life.
hedgehogs.
No,
Feels like these publishers are removing all of the good ideas.
it's the pesky publishers. I agree. I even had a fishing line and a fishing net pictures as well, with the idea of how do you fish for talent. But anyway, we kind of digress. But yes, I tried my best.
I'm going to go for another big question. Maybe we'll go fastest first on this, so not to put anyone under too much pressure.
Before you do, Louise, could I just give you my takeaway from my book? Is that all right?
Yeah,
'Cause,
absolutely. Go on
I
in.
think it's just because of we talked about the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in, and I think right now the world is becoming even more polarized, and there's a lot more us and them thinking. And what my book tries to do is to explore what drives that thinking, the social conditioning, the fear, and why we behave a certain way, the psychology behind that. And I suppose the key message is that actually it's okay to see difference. It's okay because we are all different, every one of us. But essentially, at the end of the day, we have more in common than that which divides us. And we are all carrying some form of baggage, all of us. We're all a bit broken. And if we can't see ourselves reflected in the other, then we're in a very bad place. And as HR practitioners, and again, positioning EDI within the HR framework, I'm glad actually EDI has come back in under people and culture, because I never believed it should ever have been put to one side, because it's not effective. If it's seen as a afterthought or a standalone, it's not part of the design and the processes and the policies, then it's never going to have an impact. It has to be part of the employee journey from beginning to end. The attraction, the performance management, the employee relations, termination, and development, all of that is where we should be thinking about where does our bias show up. And it does show up, and we are all biased to some degree. And it's about actually tackling that bias, and actually saying, and not being being ashamed of that. Actually, it's okay to accept we are faulty, we are slightly broken, we have slightly skewed thinking. It's allowing it to impact our lives on a day-to-day basis, whether that's in our personal relationships or our working relationships, because we can all do better than we need to be. And again, essentially, HR should be about helping people be the best versions of themselves. And that's it. That's my key takeaway.
Thanks, Shakil. Really important. I couldn't agree more. I'm very, very glad that EDI is back in the picture and under the people and culture banner as well. Last and final question then. And as I said, we'll go for whoever would like to answer this. And we talked across the board about a few challenges today, but if I was to ask you what do you think the biggest challenge for early career HR professionals transitioning into the workplaces today, what would you say? Prianka?
I think it's just getting the foundations right. So within each organization, the HR team or the people team can look very different. So you might be in a standalone role, or you might be in a shared service. but I think it's really important as a HR professional that you get the basics of all of our books, which is, the HR skills guide that we've all written a book on. And I think it's important that you get that overall foundation right and then build on that well to then move into a strategic role. I see these books as people professionals or HR professionals wanting to take that step forward. So although it is targeted for early careers, it's people that are wanting to develop themselves either in one of the specialist subjects or across all of these topics that we cover within the HR skills guide, and then developing themselves and being empowered as well, reading up on things and empowering themselves with the skills that they want to demonstrate in their day-to-day working lives. And that's what I see these books as an important factor of that.
That feels like a really neat way to wrap up. I mean, honestly, I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours with so many amazing perspectives. But hopefully listeners have got a feeling today of, I guess, the immense depth of knowledge that's in these books. So I really do encourage everyone to go out and read them. And then to all of our guests today, Shakil, Becky, Kinsey, Gemma, Prianka, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's been a fantastic and I'd say quite uplifting conversation. I know that there are some things that aren't going well aren't going well, but there's a big challenges that we face in the HR function, the HR and the people and talent world. But I'd also say all of that change just brings so much opportunity and so much excitement to kind of craft a workplace that we're excited about. So for those who are starting their careers, joining the function or looking for that step on and step on and up, I'd say there's so much to look forward to. And I for one feeling very energetic about this future. But thank you all for joining us.